All right. Hello there, anatomy people. Here to continue back with our discussion on the electrophysiology of the heart. You learned about all of the cardiac cycle, ECGs, and pressure, and sounds, and volumes, and a lot of stuff to soak in. I know it's a lot to process, but we continue on. An important kind of concept that deals with how efficient the heart is, the idea of cardiac output. And to understand cardiac output, I got to go back and real quickly review the idea of volumes, right? Volume inside of the ventricles. So in diastolic volume and then in systolic volume. So those two. The difference between those, so let's say you have a big bottle of soda, I guess, right? So it's filled. So we say in diastolic volume of 2 liters of soda. And if I go and I pour most of it, but not all, whatever's left of that 2 liters would be considered the in systolic volume. So the difference between in diastolic volume and in systolic volume we call stroke volume. So that's how much fluid was actually ejected from that vessel, that bottle, or the heart in this case, the ventricle. So important concepts. So when we talk about cardiac output, CO, not Colorado, not carbon monoxide, but in electrophysiology, we consider this cardiac output, CO, is the volume of blood pumped by each ventricle in 1 minute. So it's just a standard measure. 1 minute we can analyze to see how much work that heart is doing. So we're gonna basically solve this little equation. Cardiac output equals to heart rate in 1 minute times stroke volume. Okay, so heart rate, I think you understand, is not too difficult to achieve, right? We can find the pulse, we can listen for the heart. So in 1 minute, we can sort of extrapolate, or we can measure heart rate directly. Stroke volume is much more invasive to measure. So just right now in the concept, in the theory behind this, right? So in 1 minute, in multiple cardiac outputs, in multiple heart rates, in multiple cardiac cycles, right? The heart beats for, let's say we're at sinus rhythm, let's say about 70 beats per minute. How much fluid was ejected out of that heart in that 1 minute, right? We need to know stroke volume. So we multiply stroke volume times heart rate, and that gives us this idea of cardiac output. So it's a rate and a volume. So at rest, so if you're just sitting there listening to this video, right? Hope you're not falling asleep, but if you're just resting, right? We're gonna represent our cardiac output in mils per minute. So we say that the person had sinus rhythm, 75 beats per minute. And just for now, right? Just for now, we say that within that 1 minute, they produced a stroke volume of 70 mils, right? 70 mils per beat. And we multiply it by the 75 beats per the minute. And if we multiply that, you get a big number, but if you notice here, they're presenting it in liters. So I think that makes a little bit more sense, the liters. So we move our decimal. So we're now looking at mils, we're looking at liters. So 5.25 liters per minute. And I hope you understand what that means. So if we remember back to the blood chapter, right? How much blood is in the human body? So in a large male, they're at about what? 5 liters. Average big female male, about 5 liters. So this is saying that at rest, your heart is moving basically your whole blood volume, through that heart, right? So 5.25 liters of blood are moving through the heart in 1 minute. It's a fair amount of work, right? So that little pump is efficient, right? But again, that's at rest. So let's say that you're just there resting, and I don't know, something, oh, I don't know, the house is on fire, we gotta run out, or damn, the cops are here, let's run out, or I don't know what's going on, but the dog came in and is chasing you out of the house or something. So now you're putting maximal effort, right? You're full sprint, full effort. So maximal cardiac output is about 4 to 5 times resting cardiac output in non-athletic people. And I don't know if you're athletic or non-athletic, but let's assume all of us got a little bit out of shape in this COVID quarantine time. So we're kind of non-athletic at the moment. So this would be average for most of us, about 4 to 5 times resting cardiac output. So just to keep it at a whole number, so if we're at 5 times resting cardiac output, this maximal CO, 5 times 5. So that means at this maximal effort, you're moving about 25 liters of blood through the heart in 1 minute. That's a lot. Right? That's a lot of blood going through that heart. Now with training, this can be even enhanced more, right? And this is the difference between athletic people and non-athletic people. Athletic people, their body is primed at a higher level than just the everyday, average folk there. But so we've seen, an increase in extreme elite athletes, cardiac outputs about 35 liters per minute. Again, that's amazing to have that much blood flowing through the heart per minute. Right? How much oxygenated blood can be going out to those active muscles? How much carbon dioxide can be cleared out? How much nutrition can be supplied to these hardworking muscles? So again, pretty impressive statistics there. So, and just the idea of the reserve, the difference between resting and maximal cardiac output, it's quite a bit. Right? So we have a lot. That heart is working at rest, but it's not working nowhere near its maximal capacity that it can work at. So just again, the concept, the theory, if I present this on an exam, I have to give you these two variables. Right? I have to tell you the heartbeat or heart rate per minute, and then I have to give you the volume per beat, or the whole stroke volume per the minute somehow. I don't know how I'll figure that out, but you have to be presented with those two variables in order for you to be able to calculate cardiac output. Okay? And again, it's in theory, we make sense of it. Again, a little bit invasive to actually figure out stroke volume. All right, so how can we regulate this important variable, this stroke volume? The heart has a couple of ways to do this, right? So we've established sort of algebraically, stroke volume is equal to in diastolic volume minus in systolic volume. So if either one of these changes, it has an impact on stroke volume. 3 main factors that affect stroke volume: preload, contractility, and afterload. So all these 3 will have an impact on that little calculation there. So preload takes us back to 2401, right? So the Frank-Starling law. So I don't know if you remember Frank Starling. It's not one person, it's 2 different last names. They came up with the same idea, so they give them both credit, the Frank-Starling law. Again, it goes back to that length-tension relationship of the little sarcomeres, of the little, so actin and myosin, those little crossheads, and how many connections they can make. So what preload basically states, the more that a muscle is stretched, the more forceful the contraction can be, right? That's basically the Frank-Starling law. If I'm gonna jump and touch the ceiling, I can't jump with my legs straight. I have to bend at the knee, stretch that muscle so that it can contract with more force. If I'm gonna throw a ball, I can't throw it very far just from here. I gotta stretch, engage more muscles, more sarcomeres, more myosin heads, so that I can generate a more forceful contraction. Well, the heart is the same. The heart is a muscle. So the more I can fill that ventricle, the more I can stretch that myocardium, the more forceful it can contract. And this applies to any muscle. Think of a woman in labor. How stretched is that uterine wall? Oh, that that uterine wall is stretched, so it's going to have a very forceful, very painful contraction, right? So there is a limit, right? You can overstretch a muscle, and we can actually have damage or trauma to the muscle. So there is a limit, but up to that limit, the greater that we stretch, the more forceful the contraction will be. Again, that's what we call preload, loading those little sarcomeres, those little cardiac cells to optimal position for greater contractile strength. So preload, the degree of stretch of cardiac muscle cells before they contract. So again, at rest, cardiac muscle cells are at shorter than optimal length. So when they're filling, they're not optimal. When they get to that moment right before systole, they're fully stretched, so they generate a strong contraction. So the idea now of a slow heart rate. So many marathon runners, long distance swimmers, cyclers, they have a very slow heart rate. And why would we say is that good? And why would having a slow heart rate be good? If we give that ventricle more time to rest, that rest is a good thing. And also it's resting, but if it's resting, it's filling up with more blood and more blood and more blood. So each contraction, is systolic contraction that it undergoes, is going to be more efficient. That's an important word, efficiency. So it's resting more and is generating a greater forceful contraction with each beat. So very, very efficient system that way. So increased venous return distends or stretches the ventricles and increases their contractile force. So I hope how you can see now preload, how can that have an effect on how much fluid is coming out of the heart. The more we have in to begin with, there's a greater chance that we can move more out as well. Right? So preload. Contractility. Okay, contractility is a little bit harder to explain. It's not as consistent. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I use sports as an example, but maybe if you play golf, maybe if you, I don't know, people that play golf, some days, man, you're on a roll, you're doing good. Some days, for whatever reason, man, you're just playing bad. If you're playing sports, man, you make every shot one game, and the next game, man, you can't make a shot. Some days you just wake up happy, for no reason. You just, hey, I feel pretty good today. And other days, it's good amount of sleep, everything was fine, but I feel kind of down today, right? It just depends on all these little factors. Well, the heart is kind of similar, right? The heart can become more irritable or less irritable, right? And the heart some days is really happy. All right, I'm ready to contract. I'm ready to contract. Other days, no, I don't want to contract. Damn it, no. So this idea of contractility, the contractile strength at a given muscle length, independent of muscle stretch and in diastolic volume. So it doesn't matter how stretched or how relaxed, for whatever reason, that heart cell, that little cardiac cell, is either more active today than yesterday or less active today than yesterday. This is contractility. Anything that has an impact on contractility, we call those inotropic agents. So they have an impact on contractility. They can be positive. They can make the heart more contractile, more eager to contract, or they can be negative inotropic. They can make it less likely to contract. So positive inotropic agents increase contractility. It's like things that, I don't know, like things that piss you off, things that, man, make you want to fight, make you want to get, active, right? So they're kind of that idea. So we know calcium. Calcium's always involved in any type of muscle contraction. So the more calcium, the more eager and easy that any muscle cell, particularly the heart cell, can contract. Certain sympathetic stimulation, the fight or flight response, hormones, somebody that has a hyperthyroid condition. So they have too much of the T3, T4 hormones, and that makes the heart more contractile. The heart wants to beat more rapidly, more effectively, more, just eager to contract in general. Epinephrine, again, due to sympathetic stimulation, glucagon. So it's not listed here, but things like caffeine, right? Caffeine can act as a positive inotropic agent. I don't recommend it, I guess, but cocaine, crack, any of these things are going to be not good, but they're going to be positive inotropic agents that cause that heart to really, really want to contract. Right? So don't do those, yeah. But on the opposite side, negative inotropic agents will decrease contractility. So if you know something about acidosis, you went to the gym and man, you worked out hard, you have all this lactic acid in the system, you're sore, and those muscles, the skeletal muscles just don't want to generate the same amount of contractile force. Well, that can have an impact also on the cardiac muscle fibers. So again, negative inotropic. So acidosis, increased extracellular calcium, or I should say potassium. So potassium has an impact on the depolarization and repolarization of the heart. So if we have increased extracellular potassium, we view that as a negative inotropic situation, and anything that blocks calcium. So if calcium is not being able to get to the heart, then that's going to cause a sort of this negative inotropic situation. So again, hope this makes sense. Contractility different than the actual stretching mechanism, the preload. So preload, how well that cardiac or the ventricle, the myocardium is stretched. Contractility at any point of the stretch, how active, how antsy, how pissy, how active that little muscle cell is, right? That's contractility. Now, you can read through all that. That's from the book, just showing you the actual cellular mechanism for these sort of ideas. Afterload. Okay, afterload has to do with the vessels, the major arteries outside of the heart. So if I'm the ventricle, my job is to push liquid from this big chamber into a little tube. That's the laws of physics. That's work, right? I got to have enough pressure to get all this liquid into a little tube. Well, if somebody has hypertension, high blood pressure, that means that the pressure out there is already high. It's strong, and that pressure wants to push blood in. Luckily, we have valves that's preventing that. But if it's high pressure out there, then I got to contract even more forcefully to force blood out. So afterload, pressure that must be overcome for ventricles to eject blood into the major arteries, the aorta, the pulmonary trunk. So that's one of the bad symptoms, or I should say the bad complications of high blood pressure, of hypertension. It puts an extra heavy workload on the heart, on the ventricle to eject blood into those major arteries. So hypertension increases afterload. And if the heart is having to work too hard and it can't force enough blood out, then that means my end systolic volume will be affected. It will not be very low. It'll be kind of high. And then that's going to have a negative impact on my stroke volume. So we want to be able to move as much blood out as possible. If we have low pressure out there, makes it easier. If there's high blood pressure out there, the heart is going to struggle to remove blood, increasing end systolic volume. And if we have a high end systolic volume and we subtract it from the end diastolic volume, those numbers are closer together. So we're going to have a smaller number that is our stroke volume. So hypertension, not good because it has a hard impact on afterload. Makes it difficult for the heart to push that blood out. All right, so hope that's making sense. So that deals with, let me back up several slides. That deals with stroke volume, right? That's the one half of the calculation. So let's look at factors that now can impact heart rate. Heart rate will have an impact also on cardiac output. So inotropic deals with contractility. Chronotropic deals with rate. Chrono means time. So chronotropic factors are going to have an impact on the rate of the heart, the speed at which that heart is beating. If something is positive chronotropic, it will increase heart rate. Negative chronotropic, it will decrease heart rate. We go back to our nervous system, right? Our sympathetic nervous system. We know that epinephrine can act as an inotropic situation, but it can also act as a chronotropic factor as well. So norepinephrine causes the pacemaker to fire more rapidly. So it can enhance and speed up that SA node's sort of depolarization as well. So it has a two impacts. So maybe good test question there. Norepinephrine being both a positive chronotropic and positive inotropic situation. And everybody remembers sympathetic, right? Sympathetic, they say the fight or flight response. That was never my first option. That was too small. Mine was always the flight or fight. I would fight you, but damn it, there would have to be no other chance. I'm trapped somewhere, right? But if given the chance, I was fast. I was always able to, to escape. Usually, most of the time, I could escape danger. But so sympathetic, strong emotional stimulus, fear, and you're upset, and norepinephrine causing an increased heart rate. On the flip side, right, parasympathetic is the nice and relaxed, calm situation. So parasympathetic nervous system opposes sympathetic effects. And I'm going to hit two important sort of nerve connections here too. So when we talk about parasympathetic, we talk about vagal tone. And I'm not going to have time to go back and teach you about nerves. You should learn this in 2401, the different nerves in the body. If you remember the vagus nerve, the wandering nerve, so that one is going to be associated with our parasympathetic stimulation, right? And we're going to have a different little cluster that's involved with the sympathetic stimulation. Remember, the heart is independent. It's autorhythmic, but it can be influenced by both sympathetic and parasympathetic. So both positive chronotropic and negative chronotropic situations. So the heartbeat is modified, not initiated. Heartbeat is modified by the autonomic nervous system. So we have a little cluster in the medulla. And again, our sympathetic neurons and vagus nerves. So these are going to be our locations where the brain is communicating with the heart. So the cardio acceleratory center innervates the SA and AV nodes, the heart muscle itself, and the coronary arteries through sympathetic neurons. It even tells us, right? Sympathetic, fight or flight, cardio acceleratory, so speeding up the heart. So we have an impact at the first drummer, the SA node, the second drummer, the AV node, the muscle, the myocardium itself, and even the arteries that are feeding the heart. The cardioinhibitory center inhibits the SA node and AV nodes through parasympathetic fibers in the vagus nerves. So important sort of brake pedal for the heart. So the book has some decent pictures on this. I don't want to get so bogged down in all the nerves from last semester, but just want to show you here. So there's our SA node, AV node, and we have our, again, sympathetic fibers in green. So we are stimulating the SA node. We can stimulate the AV node, the myocardium itself, and then the coronary vessels as well. Right? So in green, sympathetic, speeding up, positive chronotropic situations. Parasympathetic is like, stop. And I like to think of, para. Somebody's, your old Hispanic neighbor. Orle, para, calm down, para. So he's telling you to slow down. So where are we going to give those messages to? We're going to feed into the SA node and also the AV node. So in purple, the brake pedal, and in green, the go, right? The go signal. So again, these are secondary to the actual heart and its own rhythm, its own depolarization. But again, the heart can be impacted. It can be influenced sympathetically and parasympathetically. Reflexes, I'm not going to get into that. I'll hit that later. So there's a lot of these good flow charts throughout the book, throughout the internet, just the way of putting everything together, right? The main concept here being cardiac output. What are some things that have an impact on cardiac output? Stroke volume and heart rate. What are some things that can affect heart rate? Well, parasympathetic activity, or sympathetic and parasympathetic activity. What are some things that can affect stroke volume? Preload in diastolic volume, in systolic volume, contractility. So again, see if you can piece all of this together and make sense of the whole concept. It's a lot. It's a lot of things to kind of soak in and integrate together there, right? But nice little flow chart here, I think. So chemical regulation of heart rate. So there's chemicals also that can have an impact on the heart. We've kind of talked a little bit about this, but there's the hormones epinephrine, the thyroxine, so different variations, T3, T4 hormones of the thyroid. And there are little common ions, calciums and potassiums. So a lot of things can have also an effect on heart rate. They can impact contractility, which will affect stroke volume, but they can also have an impact on heart rate itself. What else can affect or influence heart rate? Our age. Right? If you've ever heard of a pregnant woman, the little heart rate of a baby, it's not 75 beats per minute. Like, what the hell is going on in there, right? Our heart rate basically slows as we age, right? It's fastest when we're a baby. And if you listen to grandpa's heart, it's a slow rate, right? So it slows down as we age. There's slight variations in gender due to the different hormones, estrogen, testosterone. Whether you exercise or you don't exercise has an impact on the heart rate, as well as body temperature. Cold and heat have an impact on heart rate. Just some vocabulary, some imbalances that you're gonna maybe see as well on the ECGs. So if we associate 75 beats per minute as normal sinus rhythm, right? That's normal sinus, 75. At rest, if the heart rate is above 100 beats per minute, it's not that you ran up the stairs and sat down and rested. No, it's just you've been at rest. There's been no recent prior physical activity. At rest, 100 plus beats per minute, we say that's tachycardic. So they're exhibiting tachycardia. It's an abnormally fast heart rate. In and of itself, it may not be too terribly bad, but again, understand your heart is beating too fast. It's not resting. It's not waiting enough time to get a very efficient preload. So it's something that we don't really want. We don't view this as something healthy. And if left unchecked, it may persist to fibrillation, which can be bad, which is bad. We don't want fibrillation, right? Bradycardia. So bradycardia, slow rate. I used to make Tom Brady jokes here, but he's not in New England anymore. But so bradycardia means slow heart rate, right? So a rate slower than 60 beats per minute at rest would be then bradycardia. again, bradycardia is, if somebody has bradycardia, it doesn't mean they're sick or they're dying. In many cases, it means that they're very well-trained athletes. Their heart is in great condition. It rests, has a long resting phase, generates a very good preload. If a person doesn't exercise, very bad out of shape, and they're exhibiting bradycardia, something else is not quite right in there. Then we got to figure out, why is the heart beating so slow? Is it a SA node problem? Is, some sort of chronotropic or inotropic situation going on? So bradycardia may result in grossly inadequate blood circulation. We start to have stagnation of the blood. We start to have congestive failure, is like a traffic jam of blood. The heart's not being able to move blood efficiently through that system. So, and again, it may be the desirable result of endurance training as well. So that's the goal for running marathons, for going out and exercising. That's the long-term goal, right? You tear up your knees and your back, but damn it, your heart is nice and relaxed there, right? If, again, bradycardia is not dealt with, it can progress into this congestive heart failure, where our cardiac output is so low, the heart is not moving fluid out, that blood circulation is inadequate to meet the tissue needs. So a lot of factors can cause congestive heart failure. Coronary atherosclerosis. So the blood supply to the heart is clogged, right? So we don't have a lot of good supply to the heart. The myocardium is not receiving enough oxygen. Persistent high blood pressure. So excessive and persistent afterload is very, very bad for the heart. Multiple myocardial infarcts. So little heart attacks because potentially of the atherosclerosis, the hardening, the clogging of the arteries, not enough blood supply, nutrient supply, oxygen supply to the myocardium. Cardiomyopathy, so some sort of disease to the myocardium, could be scarring, could be some other factor, could be a weakening of the heart. There's multiple things that can cause this, right? But some genetics, some environmental, that kind of stuff. But again, you don't want the heart to fail. You want to have a very efficient pump. So be conscious of your diet, be conscious of your exercise. You have one heart, right? You want it to last as long as it possibly can, and it will work. It will beat, a billion, gazillion times throughout your life. Just, again, help it out as much as you can as well. Things to look forward to as we get old, right? Getting old doesn't seem very fun, but hey, I guess it beats the other alternative. Our valve flaps start to get thick and sclerified, so they don't seal as efficiently. There's more leakage, more inefficiency, turbulent flow of the heart, of the blood, declining cardiac reserve, scarring, fibrosis of cardiac muscle, clogged arteries. Yeah. So again, as they say, getting old is not for the weak. It's not for the faint of heart. So it's, again, keep in good health now when you're young, and make them good habits, good lifelong habits. So when you're old, it's, you can be functional at a higher level than maybe some of your other peers at that age. So with that will conclude my discussion on cardiac output. That's the last bit I want to include on exam 1. So I'll work on blood vessels and things, but that won't be for another exam, for exam 2. But this is a good stopping point for your cardiac output lecture and for the section on the heart. Right? So a lot of stuff to soak in, give you this week to kind of catch up, get on track, work on your Pearson, work on your Labster, work on your ECG case studies. So you got enough to keep busy, and I will keep busy as well on this side too. So with that, y'all have a good day, and I'll see y'all next time.